Hi, I'm Max, and you're watching Progress Isn't Radical. With Trump set to take the presidential office soon, I thought that this was a good time to take a look back at Biden's presidency and to score it. I don't think it's a secret that Harris partially lost to being tied to Biden's administration. Trump and the Republicans spent all their time growing about inflation, gas prices, the price of eggs and milk, and how no one could afford anything at all anymore. But is that actually the truth? What sort of policy accomplishments did the Biden administration have? Or did Biden sit in his office for 4 years twiddling his thumbs? How was Biden received by other nations? Republicans claim that Biden has allowed the world to fall apart with all the wars he supposedly began. Or maybe Biden actually held back authoritarianism. Lastly, we'll take an overall look at the three categories of economy, domestic policy, foreign affairs, and then rank his general efficacy to average out the final score for Biden's legacy. We can't begin to understand Biden's economy without first knowing how things were at his inauguration. The year was 2021, and COVID was still ravaging the world. The nation had already lost an estimated 10 million jobs, putting unemployment at nearly 7%. Inflation was growing, eventually reaching 9%, and Trump spent $3.1 trillion, or nearly 50% of our entire GDP, the previous year. With the recession underway, the economic outlook was poor not only for the United States, but also the rest of the world. Experts predicted it would take at least half a decade before anything began normalizing, let alone seeing the country prosper once more. Today, we can look back and see the economy not only bounce back much quicker than anticipated, not only are negative metrics under control, but also that we are much farther ahead than any other comparable nation. Let's take a look at the stats. For those of you lucky enough to be retiring, or to have stocks in general, you experienced a great 4 years where the stock market grew nearly 60%, an incredible rate considering the economy was supposed to crash. Unemployment has spent the most time below 4% since 1953. After Trump caused an incredible amount of inflation to build up during his term, Biden has been able to bring the inflation down to normal at just about 2%. If that wasn't enough, new businesses are up a whole 30% from pre-pandemic levels. To be clear, not during COVID, levels before COVID. To summarize it all together, the JP Morgan Chase chairman and CEO of the number one bank in the world, Jamie Dimon, stated, "If you look at the economy before the pandemic, it was very low growth for 20 years. But if you look at the economy since then, it's been booming. The American consumer, even if we go into a recession, is much wealthier than before. Debt service ratios are very low, their home prices are up, their stock prices are up. Mr. Dimon should know how well the American consumer is doing, as investors are paying a record 28% average premium to own American stocks over others in the rest of the world, a number twice that paid under Trump. In short, the American economy has recovered better than any other nation in the world. It is looking like it will continue prospering, as long as Trump doesn't ruin it with his demented policies. And so, after considering unemployment rates, stock market, national GDP growth of 8%, and controlled inflation, President Joe Biden receives a 10 out of 10 in the economic category. If I could, I would even give Biden higher than 10, considering what sort of mess he inherited from Trump. So if Biden's economy actually was good, did it get to the point it did by accident, or did Biden's policy have something to do with it? Well, let's take a look at the major bills which were passed during his tenure. His first major legislative success was the American Rescue Plan Act, which gave $1,400 to each adult and expanded the child tax credit by $300, thereby drastically reducing child poverty. The bill also expanded eligibility for healthcare benefits, which many people took great advantage of. Next, Biden managed to pass a historic Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which put nearly $1 trillion over a decade into roads, bridges, ports, water, and public transit, among others. Then, in 2022, the CHIPS and Science Act passed in order to bolster America's manufacturing and technology capabilities, of which $200 billion was earmarked for technological scientific research. The last great bill which Biden passed before the radical right retook the House and killed any sort of bipartisanship was the Inflation Reduction Act, which expanded Medicare for older adults, established permanent family and medical leave, and has today brought in nearly $3 trillion in private investments with over 11,000 businesses participating. If you lost count, that's 4 major bills passed which historically address gaps in our government infrastructure and in individual healthcare. Most presidents are lucky to get 1 or 2 major bills through in 2 terms, but Biden managed to get 4 through in just 2 years. Not only that, but these 4 major bills not only stimulated the economy enough to get the nation back to a prosperous path, but they also were highly effective in what they aimed to do. After considering these facts, I give Biden a 9 out of 10 for his domestic policy effectiveness. Lastly, we're taking a look at Biden's foreign affairs. After Trump left a tattered NATO, a COVID-ravaged nation, and authoritarians looking to capitalize on America's weakness, Biden came out in full force by expanding NATO by having Sweden and Finland join the alliance. He led efforts to counter Russia's aggression against Ukraine, giving billions of dollars in old equipment. To date, Russia has lost more than 500,000 men to death and injuries, and 50% of their economy is dependent on war production, which means that as soon as they end the war, their economy will collapse completely. As is, Biden led a successful coalition effort to pin Russia's economy to the ground, so that Russia has not only been neutralized as a threat for at least a decade to come, but has also been proven that their army is a mere paper tiger. After all, we know that the Russian military is the second most powerful in Ukraine. It has gotten so bad for them that they have had to resort to begging Iranians for technology and North Korea for manpower and old Soviet-era artillery shells. Furthermore, Biden expanded the Pacific Alliance, which is a bit like the NATO of the Pacific to contain China, to include the Philippines, in addition to current members of Australia, Japan, South Korea, Thailand, and of course the United States. This historic coalition of Pacific powers has single-handedly made China think twice about invading Taiwan. And if China isn't willing to risk invading a tiny island off its coast, then we can safely say that it has been contained for the moment. Of course, we have to talk about the Hamas-Israeli conflict happening in the Middle East. Though the conflict is regrettable in the amount of lives being lost on both sides, we know by keeping communication channels open, Biden has been able to minimize Palestinian deaths by keeping constant pressure on an aggressive Israel. Though Israel has a right to defend itself, having the United States be present to try and avoid unnecessary deaths has certainly saved lives. And at this moment, we are days away from a Hamas-Israeli ceasefire, something which many thought impossible. In short, Biden strengthening NATO to its strongest it has ever been, has stymied authoritarian expansionism in Russia and China, has expanded an ever-growing Pacific alliance, and has moderated the Hamas-Israeli conflict. Considering that he had to do all of this after Trump had torpedoed the American foreign reputation over his term, Biden receives a 9 out of 10 in foreign affairs. It's now time to add up all of the categories and give Biden his final score. With a full 10 out of 10 in his economic category, a 9 out of 10 in domestic policy achievements, and a 9 out of 10 in foreign affairs, Biden scores an extremely respectable 9.33 out of 10, with a roundup to 9.5 out of 10 due to the unusually difficult environment he inherited from Trump in all three categories. I believe that once historians and people look back at the Biden presidency, they will see a man who stood up to authoritarians, who got America back onto its feet after an incredibly challenging time, and who did his best to pass policy which would help the average American in their daily life. Mark my words, Joe Biden will go down as one of the best modern presidents in American history. So what do you think? Will history look kindly at Joe Biden? Will people look longer back in 4 years after another disastrous Trump term? Or maybe you think that the nation is a complete mess right now. Whatever your opinion, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment below. And always remember, progress isn't radical.